I've thought for a while that you're like one of our premier chroniclers of American icons. You know, you just had the Lady Bird Diaries this past year, your film on John Lewis, of course, even your remarkable film about Pete Souza, which is all about capturing these kind of iconic moments. Um, where does Luther Vandross fit in next? Why was he the next logical step for you?
Well, thank you so much for saying that. I do feel really lucky to get to spend some time with the lives of these people. I think it's funny, like you wouldn't put that band together necessarily if you were like Lady Bird Johnson, Bobby Kennedy, and Luther Vandross discuss. But what they all share for me is they are people who you think you know. And there's so much more to their stories and to how they became the people that they are, the people that we love, who have contributed so much to our culture. So investigating, unpacking, discovering like the people behind the celebrity, that is always really interesting to me. And then they actually, all of them share a quality which is so fascinating to me. And I feel like I'm constantly interrogating like where that comes from. And there is this strength, resilience, um, and intentionality. There's this purpose. So Lady Bird never meant to be the first lady. That was not in her, on her dance card. Luther, but she rose to the occasion and she leaned into what she was good at. Luther is a different story. He always thought that he was going to be doing what he loved and that he was always a leader. And what I love about that is the stories of Black artists are music saved me. I came from this tragic circumstance. That's not Luther's story. Luther's story is loving parents, and he kind of had this sense of self. And when I think of him having that sense of self in the 1960s, when Vietnam is raging and the civil rights is raging, and Luther is just focused. He's focused on his music. He's focused on being the best. And so I just wondered where that came from. And so the opportunity to do it with Sony meant we have all the rehearsal footage. We have all his letters. We have, his liner notes, his sketches. As a kid, he's sketching out the costumes of the performers. He's dreaming about what he's going to be. So having that wealth of material, made it like such an irresistible topic for a documentary.
He had a total vision that's really unique
Yeah.
among artists, and I think it's watching it now. It's so tragic that he left us in 2005, but he is such a contemporary, up to the minute figure. He feels so relevant to 2024.
Yeah, he really does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
was that something that like you felt like, wow, he resonates now as much as at any time?
Once you're thinking about it, you realize how Luther is so much the soundtrack to our lives. His songs, his music is still everywhere, and it is so timeless. And that I really wanted to kind of show that he's everywhere. And then there were the like delightful discoveries that like Luther did jingles, like these commercials that I grew up listening to, or that he was a background singer for Bette Midler and David Bowie and all these like incredible artists. But he is contemporary, and he is this music that like you can't help but smile, and when I talk about this movie to people, I'm like, oh, it's so much fun, and they're like, didn't he die early of complications from a stroke? I'm like, yeah, except for that part, but like while he was here, it just was such a joy to be watching him hone his craft and insist on being excellent.
I mean, the clips that you have in this are just fantastic, and being able to work with Sony and have access to that, it's really seeing an artist, develop and hone his style over the years. That's really remarkable, and I think that's one of the things that like you don't just show why Luther matters, but you show why his art mattered in such a powerful way. How what kind of evolution did you see in his career?
Yeah. First of all, I love that question because that's what we're trying to do. So it's really nice when someone sees what you try to do because they don't always see what you're trying to do. Coming out of working on Lady Bird Diaries, which was all archival, really helped me to dig into the Luther story. And so part of what I wanted to do was bring people back in time and think about. So what I saw was here's a kid who's going to the Apollo Theater in Harlem. And what would that be like to be a teenager walking the streets of Harlem? Well, he's seeing all these colors and he's seeing and he's hearing all this music. It's this cacophony of sound and color and inspiration. And then, so then by the time that we get to his shows, I hope people will be like, he was seeing this when he was a kid. He's watching Ed Sullivan's show. He's watching Diana Ross, and Dionne Warwick. And he says, like, those are the singers I studied. He studied Aretha Franklin. So I think what you see from him is, this is the artist I want to be. Here's the people I admire. What can I take from them? What can I be inspired by? And then just kind of running with his own talent. And so the way we built the film is that you see all these component parts, all these influences that came, working with David Bowie. Luther wasn't even supposed to be there, like Bowie was coming. Bowie was Ziggy Stardust. And Bowie like intentionally said, I want to work with these Black singers. I want to hear the Philly sound. And so he was evolving musically, and Luther's there, and they begin a lifelong, kind of relationship. Luther ends up arranging with Bowie his first American album. And so people don't know that. And Luther's 20 something when he's doing this. He's a baby. So, understanding like he didn't come from nowhere. Like this is like a progress and a honing of craft in a really intelligent way. And I wanted to highlight all of that.
I'm really fascinated by, how filmmakers find focus in their work and the story that they're trying to tell. And obviously in this case, you had so much archival material. How did you find the focus of your narrative? How did you dial in on what was most important?
So with Luther, the first thing we started with were the lyrics, because he was such an intelligent and prolific songwriter. And I thought, like, let me actually listen to what he was saying. Like, and if you read a lyric, it's so different than singing a song, where like sometimes, you catch yourself singing something and you're like, did I just say that? Like, my kids are here. Like, I shouldn't be saying that. But reading Luther's lyrics and seeing like his focus and the rhythm of language, it's like poetry. So I actually started there. And then we kind of were looking back at what was happening in the world while he was writing. What kind of was he responding to? So you've got the Black Power movement. He starts in a youth band where they're singing about they're going to make it to the top. They're young and Black. So I was like, how would that have landed for him? And that just like kind of fueled his desire, his like sense of purpose. So we kind of let Luther guide us, through like, and that's why one of the things that's really important to me is like all of the archive is, I try and treat it like I shot it. Like, what do you want to see? If you did like a 360, I want to bring you back in time. So by the time you come up, you feel like I lived all of this. So even for people who weren't there then, like, I hope they get a little sense of what it was like to live through from the 60s to the 70s to then like rap coming on the scene. So he has a whole career where then he goes, this whole new musical genre comes on. What becomes of an artist when like something else becomes popular? So so I think it was really kind of, I tried to really like actually channel him in a way. Like, how do you have to navigate? How do you have to pivot when you're an artist?
I also really appreciated the sensitivity with which you handled the discussion of his sexuality. I could imagine, not that there's any indication in your body of work that you would have ever done this, but in another documentary, perhaps that might have been a little bit more a source of inquiry. And I like that you handled it like more in terms of just like showing how he blurred some boundaries, the fact that he took inspiration from so many female artists in his youth and in developing his singing style. But how, with the question of his sexuality, like, how did you settle on that particular approach?
The question about his sexuality was one of the more challenging topics, because we are not homophobic, and we are living in 2023, 2024, where thank goodness that, we've forgotten how difficult it was for people to live their full lives. and how much discrimination people were facing. So if you're in the 90s, it's AIDS, George Michael isn't out. Like people who were way, kind of out of the closet. And even we don't even talk about closets anymore, right? So what we tried to do was balance the here's how Luther handled those questions in his life. But it was really, really important to me to, and I hope the viewer senses, like, I'm trying to honor how he lived, because also it's important to not out people when they do not want to be outed, when they do not choose that. And so I feel like the question of his sexuality was more something that he was constantly struggling with how to address, and that was the focus. So we tried to do that, and then talk to people who loved him and understood that he had a struggle, and also hoped for more for him. They hoped that he could live a full life. So in the end, I was like, I'm going to let him have the last word and hope that that is satisfactory. But I also, hope that people appreciate how far we've come, and that I hope that, other artists, like, they don't, if they don't choose to, they don't have to worry about losing their audience, about losing their record deals. And that was the real state of play for people. And so I think we have to remember that he was not living in the world of today.